All right, welcome to chapter 3. This is on page 35 in Huxley's Perennial Philosophy, and it's all about personality, sanctity, divine incarnation. Some talk here. Here we go. The word personality is derived from the Latin, and its upper partials are in the highest degree respectable. For some odd philological reason, the Saxon equivalent of personality is hardly ever used, which is a pity. For if it were used as currently as belch is for eructation, would people make such a reverential fuss about the thing connoted as certain English-speaking philosophers, moralists, and theologians have recently done? Personality. Sounds like a nice word. We're constantly being assured is the highest form of reality with which we are acquainted, but surely people would think twice about making or accepting this affirmation if, instead of personality, the word employed had been its Teutonic synonym, selfness. Yeah. Personality is selfness, egoic I, the personality. 4. Another one is well, when you meet me, you're not meeting me, you're meeting my representative. Yeah, my representative. For, as all exponents of the perennial philosophy have constantly insisted, man's obsessive consciousness of and insistence on being a separate self is the final and most formidable obstacle to the unitive knowledge of God. We love our selfness. We want to be justified in our love. Therefore, we christen it with the same name as it is applied to theologians as Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. On to page 37, that without a full special grace, full freely given by God, and also a full according ableness on thy part to receive this grace, this naked knowing and feeling of thy being may in no wise be destroyed. We're reading from the Cloud of Unknowing. Oh, yeah, this is the sorrow of self. Oh, what's that? Nobody knows what that is. This sorrow, when it is had, perhaps it is better to read a little more of this. All men have matter of sorrow, but most especially he feeleth matter of sorrow that knoweth and feeleth that he is. Is what, though, right? All other sorrows in comparison to this be, as it were, game to earnest, for he may make sorrow earnestly that knoweth and feeleth not only what he is, but that he is. And whoso felt never this sorrow, let him make sorrow, for he hath never yet felt perfect sorrow. This sorrow, when it is had, cleanseth the soul, not only of sin, but also of pain that it hath deserved for sin, and also it maketh the soul able to receive that joy, the which revealeth from a man, reaveth from a man all knowing and feeling of his being. Like dark night of the soul, right? Dark night of the ego. So pursue that, ere the time be that they may perfectly be one unto God in perfect charity. And this is quite a bit. And so it is with most people. What is with most people? Top of page 40. The will is free, and we are at liberty to identify our being with exclusivity with our selfness and its interests regarded as independent of indwelling spirit, right? And transcendent God, in which case we shall be passively damned or actively fiendish, or exclusively with the divine within us and without, in which case we shall be saints. Or finally, with self at one moment or in one context, and with spiritual not self at other moments in another context, in which case we shall be average citizens, to theocentric, to be wholly lost, and too egocentric to achieve enlightenment and a total deliverance. This would be the nice, normal, unregenerate people. You need the transformation of consciousness. Since human craving can never be satisfied except by the unitive knowledge of God, and since the mind-body is capable of an enormous variety of experience, we are free to identify ourselves with an almost indefinite number of possible objects, with the pleasures of gluttony, for example, or intemperance, or sensuality, money, power, fame, with our family, regarded as a possession or actually an extension and projection of our own selfness, with our goods and chattels, our hobbies, our collections, artistic or scientific talents, some favorite branch of knowledge, Yeah, it goes on. Some fascinating special subject, profession, political parties, churches, pains, illnesses, memories, success, misfortune, hopes, fears, schemes for the future, and finally with the eternal reality, within which and by which all the rest has its being. And we are free, of course, to identify ourselves with more than one of these things simultaneously or in succession, hence the quite astonishing, improbable combination of traits making up a complex personality. Ego, right? Thus, a man can be at once the craftiest of politicians and the dupe of his own verbiage, can have a passion for brandy and money and an equal passion for the poetry of George Meredith and underage girls and his mother, for horse racing and detective stories and the good of his country, the whole accompanied by a sneaking fear of hellfire, a hatred of Spinoza, and an unblemished record for Sunday church going. Yeah, that explains pretty much most of us, right? Nice, normal, unregenerate people. Ourself in one moment and spiritual not self at others, serving two masters. Let's skip ahead, bottom of page 41. So similarly, like a trust in a higher power, such action. Oh, So there's this bit about how men behave in combat and how they're trained, and how they can be impersonal to the situation and act perfectly when called upon. Such action is typical of a crew who know intimately what fear is, so that they can use without being distracted by its physiological concomitants, who are well trained so that they can direct their action with clarity, and who have all the more than personal trust inherent in a unified team. Oh, so we can do this if we want to. Yeah, but paradoxically as it may seem, it is for very many persons much easier to behave selflessly in time of crisis than it is when life is taking its normal course in undisturbed tranquility. When the going is easy, there is nothing to make us forget our precious selfness, nothing except our own will to mortification and the knowledge of God, to distract our minds from the distractions with which we have chosen to be identified. All those things. We are at perfect liberty to wallow in our personality, to our heart's content, and how we wallow. It is for this reason that all the masters of the spiritual life insist so strongly upon the importance of little things. Saint Francois de Sales. True vigilance in the spiritual life. God requires a faithful fulfillment of the merest trifle given us to do, rather than the most ardent aspirations to things to which we are not called. J.P. de Caussade. There is no one in the world who cannot arrive without difficulty at the most eminent perfection by fulfilling with love obscure and common duties. All right, so this is the actual calling to all at the bottom of 43. The saint is one who knows that every moment of our human life is a moment of crisis. For at every moment we are called upon to make an all-important decision, to choose between the way that leads to death and spiritual darkness and the way that leads towards light and life, between interests exclusively temporal and the eternal order, between our personal will or the will of some projection of our personality and the will of God. In order to fit himself to deal with the emergencies of his way of life, the saint undertakes appropriate training of mind and body, just as the soldier does. But whereas the objectives of military training are limited and very simple, namely to make men courageous, cool-headed, and cooperatively efficient in the business of killing other men, with whom personally they have no quarrel, the objectives of spiritual training are much less narrowly specialized. Here the aim is primarily to bring human beings to a state in which, because there are no longer any God-eclipsing obstacles between themselves and reality, they are able to be aware continuously of the divine ground of their own and all other beings. Secondarily, as a means to this end, to meet all, even the most trivial circumstances of daily living without malice, greed, self-assertion, or voluntary ignorance, but consistently with love and understanding, because its objectives are not limited, because for the lover of God, every moment is a moment of crisis. Spiritual training is incomparably more difficult and searching than military training. There are many good soldiers, few saints indeed. We have seen that in critical emergencies, soldiers specifically trained to cope with that kind of thing tend to forget the inborn and acquired idiosyncrasies with which they normally identify their being, and transcending selfness to behave in the same one-pointed, better than personal way. What is true of soldiers is also true of saints, but with this important difference, that the aim of spiritual training is to make people become selfless in every circumstance of life, while the aim of military training is to make them selfless only in certain very special circumstances and in relation to only certain classes of human beings. This could not be otherwise, for all that we are and will and do depends in the last analysis upon what we believe the nature of things to be. The philosophy that rationalizes power politics and justifies war and military training is always, whatever the official religion of the politicians and war makers, people support it, some wildly unrealistic doctrine of national, racial, or ideological idolatry, having as its inevitable corollaries the notions of some German word, Herrenvolk. We gotta remember that in 1945, right? There's a war going on, which meant the lesser breeds without the law, the infidel, right? So, characteristics of saints going on. Those who win through to the unitive knowledge of God set out upon their course from the most diverse starting points. One is a man, another a woman, one a born active, another a born contemplative. No two of them inherit the same temperament and physical constitution, and their lives are passed in material, moral, and intellectual environments that are profoundly dissimilar. Nevertheless, insofar as they are saints, insofar as they possess the unitive knowledge that makes them perfect as their Father which is in heaven is perfect, they are all astonishingly alike. Their actions are uniformly selfless, and they are constantly recollected, so that at every moment they know who they are and what is their true relation to the universe and its spiritual ground. Pause there.